Bruce, you must have something really good too.
Of course I do. It's Bruce Danielson, and I guess I'm here to entertain you too.
Good afternoon, high noon. Welcome to this meeting of the Districting Commission. It appears we have a quorum and expect Commissioner Johnson to be joining us shortly. First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from our meeting on August 11th. Looking for a motion or?
So move. Second.
Thank you. Any changes or any? We're all good there. Take a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. Thank you. New business. First item up, we do have the census numbers, and we've had a chance to look at those and see how they compare against some of the estimates we've been working with. And Jeff's been working on some mapping for us based upon our last meeting, and has a lot of information to share. So welcome.
Hi, Jeffrey Schmidt from the City Planning Office. There is a lot of information to share, and I won't bore you with a lot, but I will give you a general overview. The quick summary is we weren't that far off, which was nice. However, the numbers didn't fall into the same area that we would like them to fall into. So first off, the number came in at 192,900. So that's really good. I mean, I was expecting it to be like that 191, so we were pretty close to where we were expecting it to be. The percentage increase over the last 10 years, we're at 25% increase. Every 10 years, when we look at this, the previous 10 years, we were at 23.9. Before that, we were at 23.1. Before that, we were at 23.9. So again, this is where we were supposed to be. It wasn't like we were down. It wasn't a huge increase. We've been at that 24% increase each and every census. Housing numbers, again, were really good. We're at 83,500 housing units. It's a 17,000 number increase in our housing numbers, which is generally to be expected. That was good to see. Our vacancy rates, our occupied numbers came in about where we expected between 2020 and 2010. And then our race and ethnicity was pretty much the same, you know. The calls I'm getting is that's the number that everybody's excited about as well. It's really high. It's not really high in Sioux Falls. It's really high throughout the world, throughout Sioux Falls, throughout South Dakota, throughout the upper Midwest. We have in Sioux Falls, the initial findings are there's a 2% increase in the race for Black, and there's a 2% increase for ethnicity and Hispanic. Everything else is pretty standard. So in general, we're right with where everybody else was in the upper Midwest. So then, where we're at is going into a week and a half ago, we had 7 options on the table. We had some really good discussion. We were going to look at trying to keep the central district kind of whole and go from there. The 7 options that we had, none of them work. So that's the real challenge that we have. The predicament is that the central district came in much lower on the overall district number than we had expected. And so that throws off our 7 options. I've run the numbers and the totals. Generally, they're not even close to what we need to get to that 10%. So the 7 options that we had don't work. And so we needed to start working to move forward on creating some new options with that. But I'm digging down into the precincts. I'm digging down into the data on census, and that's kind of to be expected. So that's the general overview on the census data. Any questions, thoughts, comments? Yes, ma'am.
Where is the decrease in the central district over what you expected? Is it a particular area, a particular neighborhood?
So the decreases that we have in central, just about all of the precincts in central are down. Okay, not a lot, but they're generally down. 100 here, 100 there, and then one of the largest ones, which I don't have enough data yet to make a determination, but the largest one that's showing up right now is 5-9, which is southwest of 26th in Minnesota. So that's one of the larger. There's 4 precincts that have large decreases throughout Sioux Falls. That 5-9 is large, which I'm starting to look in. I'm not going to give my opinion on that one yet, but then I looked at the other one is 115. That is at 69th and Louise. So now my inquiry starts getting the best of me. I'm like, okay, so now why is that one down? So then I have an opinion on why that one's down. Okay, and then the next 2 are on the southwest. They're really in the northwest, but they're at 12th and Marion, 12th and Sertoma. And then my whole philosophy just goes, and they're the 4 largest ones that we have. They're 1,000 to 1,200 off where we were at. And for anybody that's watching this or in the future, what we had done is we had taken what census has always given us is the number of people per household. We had a 2.35 person per household. And then we had used the number of households that we show on our records for the city of Sioux Falls. Taken that household number times 2.35 and came up with an estimate. So everything I'm standing up here saying is those estimates didn't come up correctly. So does that mean there's fewer households out there, or is some parts of Sioux Falls have more kids than 2.35, or is there some that have fewer people in there than 2.35? That's to be determined because we need to dig down in the data when they start releasing more data. Today, based upon the 192,900 and the number of housing units we have, the number came in at 2.31. That's straight across the board. And now we'll start to dig down. Well, is that higher in some precincts and lower in other? We don't know yet because we don't have those breakdowns, but it did come in, which is standard every 10 years. Sioux Falls, as well as everybody else in America, Sioux Falls' numbers continue to ink down a little bit, but they're down.
And just a question of clarification. Your estimates were always just guidance to help us get started. We were going to have to go by what the census numbers came back at. That's our gold standard. We have to use those numbers.
We have to use those numbers. And most importantly, what we tried to do up to this point is get a feel for it. So now how does this commissioning work? How does it go? You have to take a whole precinct. You have to move. So that was what we were estimating, yes.
And then a follow-up question to that, if I could, though. When we did a redistricting, and our chairman would remember this one intimately, in 2017, we used numbers that were estimates, though, because there was not a federal census in 2017. It would have been the 2010 census. And if you can remind us the triggering of what percentage that we might be at this again sometime between 2021 and 2031?
Any time that your community grows by more than per our charter, anytime that your community grows by more than 15% or a census comes out, then you redistrict.
Does any of the way the data came out between 2017 versus the estimate we've been going by versus the 2020 census, does that give you any pause in how we estimate that, or just I just worry a little bit about the central district that we said there were this many people there at one point in time, and my gut's telling me that people didn't move out of those areas, but then when the census comes around, it's just a different methodology, I guess, of counting people. But do we end up with 2 different methodologies, the census year methodology and then the interim within that decade? Do you follow my line of questioning?
Yeah, generally what's the methodology, right? That's the question. And the challenge is that a United States Census they send out a form to every address throughout America and says, you shall fill this out and submit it back. So the challenge there is, did everybody do that? Okay. Our estimates are based upon number of households that we have in the community and then taking a ratio of how many people do we think live in a household and then taking that across the geographic area. We can then estimate differently per certain suburbs or locations and change it, but typically I've always done, let's just take it across the board, the same, and then there's my estimate. So, as you know, throughout time, there's always been a question about, is this census correct or not? I mean, since the Bible, there's like, is the census correct? It's really hard to get an accurate census, and it's always going to be, because you won't get 100% of the population completing their forms.
It's good information, Jeff. I think the one thing we talked to, as we look at this and see some of those shifts in that central district coming in lower than what we expected actually does give us an opportunity to look at that in a bigger sense of what we talked about at the last meeting and trying to make that central, those neighborhoods more inclusive into that central region. A little surprised, but maybe shouldn't have been, that Northeast was actually larger than what we had estimated, but of course there's been a lot of homes going up out there too.
Yep. Yep. And then at the same time, you all represent your districts, and you're doing the same estimation I am until the data really comes in. You know, do you go throughout that entire central district, do you really think 2.3 represents accurately throughout every household in there? And you're like, even at 2.25, you can easily see 4,000 people change. And you're like, that could, you know, or it's at 2.32, but maybe 2% of the population there didn't complete their census. And you're like, we're not talking about a big change. And we knew Central was going to be low and that we had to change that. So it doesn't surprise me that the number's off. It's just that the other three came in really close, and Central and Northeast were a little bit off of our estimates. So
taking into account the discussion from the last meeting, combined with the new numbers you have, you've put together some
correct
additional map options for us.
Correct. And then there's the challenge that we will lay out for you today. I have 3, maybe 4 options that I'll show you today. And then going forward, Tom will lay out kind of our next track to go forward. This is C7. I have C7, C8, C9, and G as I kind of walk through these with you. So for all of the public and stakeholders that watch this now and in the future, I was basing the first 9 C's on Central when we were really focusing on the Central District. And so these next 2 to 3 are all Central districts, and we were trying to keep them whole. And with Central, this one, I'm thinking this is the one that we still had a challenge with. Yes. So C7, I was able to move 5 different districts, as you can see over on the left-hand side, 5-7, 3-6, 4-1, 4-14, 5-6, and 5-19. And when I moved them, the numbers all worked. However, once the numbers worked, where am I? Go back to my pointer. The challenge is with 519 down in the southwest and the central. Nope, it's C9 that I have the challenge with. I'll get there. So one of the ones that we're working on, we lose contiguity and the connection between the southwest and the central. So here, the pluses, the minus, negative 5.63 and 4.06. So the numbers worked on this one, and 519 going to the southeast and staying in the central. So we were moving that from the central district and moving it to the southwest on this option. 3.6 moves from the northwest into the central, which was one of our primary focuses. 4.1 from the northeast into the central. 4.14 from the northeast into the central. And 5.6, which was in the central, moving into, 5.6 from the central and moving into the southeast. So that's one of the options. C8. This is our challenged one. So with C8, I have 8 different precincts moving. And what happened here is you can see in the southwest, as I moved 2 precincts from the central to the southwest, I moved 517 and 519, and the numbers worked, and I moved them, they're pink here, I moved them to the southwest, and the numbers worked. But then to get the numbers worked, I moved 1-3 from the southwest to the northwest. And at that point, 517, 519 no longer make the connection down to the southwest. So the numbers had worked. It was going fine until I moved 1-3 to make all the numbers work. So C8 was a possibility and it no longer functions correctly. So you have to remove C8. But I had tried that one. C9. C9, another central one. The numbers really worked pretty well. We got down to 6.84, central being the highest area at 4.06. Here, again, we got 3.36 out of the northwest into the central. We got 4.1 out of the northeast into the central. We have 5.6 coming from central over to the northeast. And then kind of still coming around to the bottom, I moved 210 and 215, bordered between Minnesota Avenue and Western, and I moved them from the southeast over to the southwest, and then continuing up to the northwest, towards that direction, I moved 1-4 from the southwest into the central, and I moved 1-3 from the southwest into the northwest. So I ended up moving quite a few districts, but tried to again stay true to what we were trying to do with central on 4-1, 4-14, 5-12, 5-14, 3-6. You can see we tried to keep that aspect of central whole. So you have C7 and C9. Now the last one is option G. And again, at this point, I was throwing everything up on the wall. I tried, I think, C10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I was trying many options to stay consistent with C, and it really wasn't working very well. So I went, give me another option to bring to this group. So you're going to find some struggles with this one just from a perspective of, this isn't what we talked about, Jeff, but it works. So if you look at G in the current new, we get at 6.61. Northwest is high, southwest is low. It turned out okay. Central stays pretty well. You're at 2.46. You're at 39,500, so we're not doing too bad in the numbers. Okay, so what I ended up doing is I moved 6 precincts all the way up on the north side. I moved 4, 5, which was in the northeast, and I move it over to the south or up to the northwest. I move it from the northeast to the northwest. Okay, then coming down from there, I take 4, 1, and 4, 14 from the northeast, and I send them into the central. And then coming down, I take 2, 3, and 2, 6, which are in the southeast, and I move them to the northeast. We had talked about the southeast district, whether it's 26th Street or 41st Street, the Big Sioux River. So I tried to stay somewhat true to that, but it gets a little bit challenging. And I tried to stay central and then work my way out to the east on this one. And then coming all the way around again, 3-6, we were trying to stay with, could you get 3-6 into the central? So I ended up moving those 3-6 different precincts to give you one more option. That was okay, it worked, but it wasn't really true to what we had sent away with 2 weeks ago. So with all that, throwing it out to you, this is kind of your first blushes at these. It gives you 3 options that work. Tom's going to go over some time frames and options. My summary to this is you have some options on the table that work. Tom was also able to send out with you an Excel spreadsheet that has the new numbers from the 2020 census per the precincts that you are more than welcome to look at now, because you will have not only the district numbers but the precinct numbers, and you can start looking at for yourself to see how you can maybe make the numbers work. And in the future we can have a scheduled meeting and you can come back and go, even send them to me and say, could we try something? But that's what we wanted to get to today. I have 3 that work. Come up with an old option, try it nights and weekends, see if you can make the puzzle work, but it's a challenge because some of these are really big. I'll stop there.
Commissioners, thoughts?
If I could, as I look at these, just looking at how the lines go and continuity and everything else, it seems like on most of these, between the northeast and the southeast, there's always going to be a little bit of some border shifting. But I guess when I look at G compared to C7, I see them as being fairly comparable, but the big, to me, the big difference is 6.61 versus 9.69 for our differences. So it seems like there's a lot more equity in the population spread amongst the districts on G.
Mm-hmm. And the real one with that is I moved in C7, I had moved the largest district, which was 2-7, and I started moving that one first, so I started on the outside to get the number to work. And then on G, I started on the inside with 3 and 2, 3, and 2, 6. Because you're like, at some point, which we've talked about, not for this group, but in future years, will we be splitting 2-7 into something else? So that's what happened with G. I'm like, we'll deal with that at a later date. And that's what happened with option G. That was my rationale.
Yeah, I agree with those comments. A couple of comments I had. I'm obviously representing the Central District, and I appreciate the effort you did here, and I appreciate seeing 4-1, 4-14, and 3-6 in the Central District. Again, the basic premise being the certain demographics being populated together and thus being represented appropriately. So I like that, and I think those options that both C7 and G are kind of along there. Personally, again, my own personal take is 2, 3, 2, 6, 2, 7, flip-flopping back and forth. That's probably always, maybe to Bob's point, could be an area that's going to flip-flop back and forth throughout time. The one thing I kind of dislike on option C7 is I think 5, 6 should be, if possible, should be in the central district. To me, again, speaking sort of from my own perspective, I'd rather see 5, 6 in the central and 5, 11 or 5, 12 or 5, 13 or any combination thereof move to the southeast. I know the numbers won't be perfect there, so you're going to say, you know, that'll mess with things a little bit. But to me, again, you're getting closer both demographically and geographically to the central district. And then, you know, the other options I don't care for as much. They get a little more convoluted, so I'm kind of along the same lines of C7 and G. I still am interested to see if there's a way to forfeit some of those southern precincts, 511, 512, 513, and see if any more of 4-4, 4-3, or 4-2 could be added to the central. I realize that's going to bring those kind of border pieces between the southeast and northeast into more play to do that. But I feel like, again, my own perspective is let's try to get the central right, and I have less personal concern with where the boundaries are kind of northeast and southeast, but I kind of like everything else about it.
Good input. Anyone else? Thoughts? Barb, Joe?
I don't know that I have anything new to add other than I think we're getting close and we have real data now. So I think it's just a little bit of homework of playing a little Tetris of switching a precinct or two here or there. But good to have some examples that where the math does work. So we have some good starting points to maybe tinker around with it. But I think we're pretty close. I'd share some of the same opinions that have been said. So.
Dropping the northeast down to 41st Street. I think that's a stretch. I would like to see that stay around 26 if possible.
You know, Jeff, to the point of your last one, I think it was G, precinct 4, 5. When I was messing with these things, and I did the same thing on one of my examples I was working on, and that's a hard one because when you look at it, it really does. The only, you know, it doesn't geographically it makes more sense in the Northeast, but when you look at how that's set up, it doesn't. There, you know, there's no housing necessarily that connects to the Northeast. There's a big land area up there in the far part of the Northeast. Probably, you know, it's one of those ones that could go either way. I think the goal has always been, I think, to try to make as many unnecessary changes as we need to, just because we'll, you know, the next group that sits here might change them back, and ultimately it's the residents and the voters in those precincts that end up being confused and kind of abused, if you will, if they're ping-ponging back and forth. And so I think, you know, as we make some of these changes, trying to think in terms of what makes the most sense long-term. But the challenge, obviously, is trying to get the numbers to match up, to Bob's point, where that range, you know, on this particular map, G is only a 6% versus a 9%.
As I was talking to staff today, it's a lot like playing with mercury. You push it, you're like, oh, it worked, and then everything else doesn't work, and you're like, and you throw it out and you go. And then after a while, your eyes blur and you try something else again. So these are all really good suggestions and ideas, and we'll continue to look at them.
One other thing anecdotally I'll mention, and this comes after our last meeting, and Tom got me thinking with some of his comments about what is the central part of the city. And so I was just kind of paying more attention to realtor ads. You know, there was the home advertised, a beautiful home in the central part of the city. And it's got it's 5,000 square feet, and it's got an extra home in the back. And it turns out it's in precinct 513. And there was another one I saw, central part of the city, and actually it's in precinct 21, which is south of the river. So, I think that the community is shifting. To Barb's point, right now it does feel like that division between southeast and northeast is 26th Street. But if you look on the left side of the map, we've made it 41st Street between the southwest and the northwest, just because of how the population is shifting. I think, you've done some things on some of these maps where, you were able to move 210 and 215 into the southwest. I think that's a step in the right direction, and we talked about that last time too, if it's possible to do that, but it's not necessary. But I think the main focus of our discussion has been, how do you define the central part of the city?
Yep.
And I think, with a lot of care given there, I think that's the primary focus, and we start to work around from there. The challenge, like I said, is making the numbers work. I even went as far on one map I did to put 117 into the northwest. It makes no sense in the northwest, but then again, maybe 4-5 doesn't either. But if you take out 3-6, which again, I'll agree, I think makes more sense in the central part of the city, you've got to bring some balance back. I get that.
And that's why I started with that 13, 14, 16, because we've talked about 26th Street and 41st Street, and southwest and northwest have really creeped south of 41st Street. So I was like trying to hold 41st Street and trying to hold 41st Street on the east side. But then you're like, well, that doesn't really work. And on the southwest, you get 3,700 and 117 and 3,200 and 110, and then the numbers just start to really hurt you at some of these. And then, Mark, just like what you're talking about, if you're in the south central part of town, 2-2 and 511 could generally be, without putting them on the Excel spreadsheet, could generally be about the same. You could go, okay, let's take 2-2 out of southeast and move it to central, and take 511 out of central and move it to southeast, because the number, and then you go, so someone who represents those two, which one makes more sense? Does 2-2, is that more central and 511's not? That's where I'm like, I'll do the numbers, you guys tell me what one represents the district better. That's the challenge.
Any other discussion?
Thank you for the options.
Yeah. That's what we're going to send you away with is, now you have the options, play with them, look around with them. We'll give you the Excel spreadsheet. Tom will give you the real crux of it. Here's the time frame, and you have options. We'll come back, we'll have the discussion, and you'll be able to move forward.
So let's talk about that, Tom.
And thank you for the Excel spreadsheet. That was very helpful. Thank you.
Now
Okay,
you have the
City
options.
Clerk Tom
Thank you for the
Greco.
options.
Play with them, look around with them. That's what we're going to send you away with is, now you have the options. We'll give you the real crux of it. Here's the play with them, look around, and you have options. We'll give you the Excel spreadsheet.
Just stand by.
That was my fault.
Okay, I had the video recording going in the background. Not anymore. Okay, so what I have up in front of you right now is one of the slides I showed you previously. This is a slide just based on the assumption that there would be a 30 September release of data, which there still will be of the detailed data. But this is what the council used to adjust the timeline. And the key point here is that the target is still by ordinance December 7th to have the final report delivered to the city council. So backing off of that, we can see November 24th, around the time a public hearing would be held, so that's the latest that could be held. meaning around October 25th. That's the latest date the plan could be made available to the public for comment. So with that in mind, and knowing that we received the data and were able to manipulate it sooner, my next slide here is simply a recommendation just to really help frame up the next discussion, which is future meeting dates. And what I would recommend, just as a mark on the wall, I think it may be possible, and we could adjust this each and every time we meet, as long as we don't go beyond the December 7th turn-in date. But what I would recommend is shooting to have a final plan prepared and ready for publication and notice to the public for their comment period by September 24th. Meaning there would be a public hearing on October 27th, followed by submitting the plan to the council November 9th. Again, if the commission needs more time, it can certainly take it per ordinance, but the thought here being that if it can be delivered sooner, that would be better, just for better notice to citizens who will be voting in the April elections. But just also pointing your attention to the top bullet again. I have there in blue at the end of the red, if a plan is ready by September 15th, all dates can move up 1 week. That works the other way too. The bottom line is, if we go beyond that September 24th or even ahead of it, we could just adjust everything accordingly and stay on a pretty decent timeline.
I guess the item is do we think we can get this done at the next meeting, next time we meet? I'm looking at my, in that case, this is just working with my schedule. September 21st would work. September 21st or 22nd would work well for me, because we're going to be gone till the 20th. I don't know how those dates work for other people.
And I could pull up, so that kind of frames really the next meeting discussion. And again, if we don't make the 24th, we could always move, because I have some requirements to publish in the newspaper. But I'll pull a calendar up here just so everyone can see what dates we have available. So just bear with me one moment.
So while you're doing that, just a quick question. In the meantime, then, we can individually work on massaging the map, send you, Jeff, our ideas, and then you will send those back to us?
Yes. So if you have any options, ideas, send it to me. I can work them up, work through, come up with a map. At that point, we'd be able to see those at that next meeting. And I'd like Mark and Tom to chime in here, because really then in the end, at that last meeting, you're basically going to say, we're going to put a plan together that says we reviewed 5 options, C, 7, 8, 9, G, H, and I, and the board, the commission recommended this to go forward. So that's what you're trying to do at that last meeting or the subsequent meeting, is that, you know, you say, we've reviewed options and here's the options, and those are still public because, as Tom said, you have a public meeting to get public comments, but the board would, the commission, excuse me, would say our recommendation would be whatever that option would be.
So looking at a timeline here, this is just, this calendar is just what's scheduled here in Carnegie Town Hall for September of next month. So certainly the 22nd, 23rd are both available. And even the 21st, albeit earlier in the day. And so if it were to work out that there was a agreeable plan for the commission, we would be able to get it published probably early the next week for a comment period, and then talk about the public hearing dates during that meeting itself.
Yeah, just looking at that calendar, if we're looking at that week, the 21st or 22nd would work for me.
So I will send out a doodle with hours and such to the commission. this afternoon and just let me know and we'll get something scheduled for
And
the
like,
21st or
yeah.
22nd.
Like you said, if we end up looking at the week of the 27th, that just essentially just pushes things back a week, but we're still well within the parameters.
Correct, well within it.
Sounds good. Brings us to the point of public comment, but we have no public with us today. So if you're watching at home, I encourage you to come next time. We'd like to hear from you before we send a proposal to the council. Any further discussion? Otherwise, meeting is adjourned. Thank you.